Hello, I'm Tamara, an instructor from the Central Branch of the Howard County Library System, and today's Upcycle project is turning plastic bags into yarn, plastic yarn, or PLARN. I'll be demonstrating two different methods of making PLARN, but first, let's take a look at some of the popular projects that PLARN is used for. Large roll-up mats are very popular and easy to make with PLARN. They're great for the pool, and many service groups make them to give to the homeless. Rugs, bath mats, placemats, and if you're into scouting, picnicking, or camping, how about a sit-upon? A fruit basket, covered baskets, a grocery bag, or any number of handy, colorful carry-alls. Backpacks, laundry or pool bags, over-the-shoulder satchels, a carrier for your water bottle, a soap dish, scrubbies, and lots of patterns for fancier bags. Explore the many jewelry options for using PLARN. Kids of all ages love friendship bracelets. These festive flower pins and pencil toppers were made following the basic directions on the circle loom. Try using PLARN in your weaving projects. Combine it with a CD. This simple homemade loom can produce bracelets, zipper pulls, shoelaces, and jump ropes, all made of PLARN. Creating PLARN loops is a great grab-and-go project because you can get away with just taking a pair of scissors and lots of plastic bags. But you may also want to consider having a ruler and a marker and maybe some clothespins on hand. And to cut multiple bags at once, you can't beat a rotary cutter and a cutting mat. Let's create some PLARN. I'm going to call this first method the loop method, since we will be cutting our plastic bag into loops. All you really need to make PLARN is a pair of scissors, but I like using clothespins to hold the slippery plastic in place. Now this particular bag has a reinforced bottom that we'll cut off first and use for a different project. We're going to set this aside, and then we're going to, you can fill the seam, cut off the handles of the bag. Some people use these to stuff other projects, or creating plastic fabric by layering plastic bags and using a heat press or iron, and then using the scraps from this project. They can become great design elements in the next project, so nothing goes to waste. Alright, so we have the rest of the bag to make our PLARN, and depending on what you want to make with your PLARN will determine how thick you cut your pieces. Now if we wanted to make a bedroll mat or a big chunky basket, I would suggest cutting this in fourths. Now you can eyeball it, or you can fold it and get the crease and be precise, or use your ruler. But again, I think eyeballing works just fine. And then we're going to cut these pieces in half. And we'll cut this one, and this gives us a nice loop. And again, the reason I like using this for especially like a mat project, is it gives you a nice thick piece of PLARN, and it's already 2-ply. Say, if you've been in scouting or you know what a lark's head knot is, there's different ways to remember how to tie one. We're going to take one loop, put it in the other, and I like to reach through, and that loop is going to come right on through, and there you have a larger piece of PLARN. Again, I use these for the bigger projects because you do need to knit or crochet around this knot. For the finer projects, we're going to learn the other method of making PLARN. And it's such a wonderful project. You can sit and talk with people, you can watch a favorite television program, or listen to an audiobook while you're making PLARN. And you can stuff it into a bag to store it. And then when you make more, you can simply attach it, again, with your lark's head knot. I'm going to pull this one through this way since it's a little bit longer. There we go. Now I've seen some people demonstrate using the T method, so I think I'll do that too, just so hopefully you'll understand the lark's head knot. We're going to take this loop and make a T. I trust you can see this. We're going to reach through and grab that other loop and then just pull gently, and there we go. And again, this can just be stuffed into another plastic bag as you continue to make miles and miles of PLARN for your project. If you want to make a project that isn't as thick and chunky, just make thinner strips when you cut your PLARN. Our next method of cutting PLARN is like making bias tape for a quilt or for sewing. And by comparison, using the loop method, we can get about 12 1-inch loops from one of those blue plastic bags we used in the last method, or we can get one continuous piece of PLARN with no knots, which is great for some of those finer projects you might want to try. So let's take just your average bag from a local mart. Again, these blue plastic bags are beautiful, but they are a little more difficult to work with because they are so shiny and slippery. And our method starts out just like the other one. Smooth out the bag, fold it, and trim off the bottom and the end. Alright, so let's take our plastic bag with the bottom and the top removed and fold up one end, not quite to the other end. Let's leave a 2-inch gap. And then another fold and another fold. Again, it doesn't matter how many times you fold it. Now, the size of our PLARN. If we wanted to create a continuous strip that is as wide as the strips we cut for the mats, which were about 4.5 inches, we may just cut this in thirds. For the project I have in mind, we are going to cut 1.5 inch strips. And you can mark it with a marker, but I usually just put the ruler on my project and start cutting only the folded part. The area, the 2-inch strip that we left at the top, does not get cut at this stage. So, 1.5 inch strips looks like this. I'm going to recommend another video of the person I learned this method from, and I know as she cuts, she folds them up. So now, when we shake this out, we kind of have a little grass skirt. But this is where we are going to make it into one continuous piece of PLARN. And I usually do this on my arm, which I'll do in just a moment. But before I do that, I'm hoping this will show up. I have another plastic bag that I just cut in the same method, and now that area that was not cut, here's where we're going to be cutting on the bias. Here are all our loops, and maybe the first few times you do this you may want to draw lines, but once you get familiar with the method, the lines aren't really necessary. But we are going to start cutting from the edge to that first cut. And then these are our bias cuts. And in doing that, we create one long piece of PLARN. When we do the actual cutting, it's simply, and now this is the beginning of our PLARN, and you might want to snip off that little end. And now it's just a matter of cutting on the bias. Trimming off the pointed end. And now we have one long piece of PLARN that doesn't have any knots and is ready to use for a project. I believe that, again, if this method is new to you, once you get the hang of it, rather than taking the time to draw the lines, now that I know what I'm doing, I just put the bag on my arm, and here's that first cut. I did draw lines on this one, so hopefully it will show up on the camera. But after I cut my loops, I just put the bag on my arm and I just start cutting on the bias. Hopefully that will save you some time, and you don't need a table or anything else to accomplish this step in making PLARN. Another time saver at this stage of making PLARN is to remove the tops and bottoms from several bags and stack them up. Make that fold just a few inches from the top. So we're just prepping about 3 bags at once. And now from one step of cutting, we have 3 bags that are ready for that last step to be cut on the bias. So just a little time saver. Another tip for this stage of making PLARN with those slick, thick plastic bags. I mentioned before that I use clothespins to help hold things in place. Binder clips also come in handy. And for weighting things down, I have some nice heavy coasters that I can just drop into place when things get a little slippery. And here again, a guideline, so that when we start cutting and things get a little slippery, like the very first step, you can put that coaster in there and help hold things in place. I hope that helps on heavier, slippery plastic bags. Creating PLARN is an ongoing project, and depending on what type of storage room you have, just some ideas. When you have lots of bags from the same store, I tend to store my PLARN in that bag, so I know that all the PLARN in here is blue and white. All my odds and ends are stored here with the end tied to the handle of the bag, so that when I want to use it or add more PLARN to it, I don't have to dig around in the bag to find the end. Another way of storing PLARN, for personal use, I think the bag method works great. When I teach classes at the library, each group of students needs their own source of PLARN for their weaving or whatever we're doing. So I roll individual balls, or because it's fun to experiment, I put PLARN on my yarn winder and just had fun doing it that way. Putting a paper towel roll on your winder creates a spool, so that if I cut more of the blue and white PLARN, I can put this right back on and continue to increase the size of the ball. So whatever works for you, it's fun to try new things. Another personal preference, I like to glue my strips together. There are different methods, but this is just one I happen to like. And I take the method from those that create seam binding or quilt binding and take the ends of my PLARN and put them at right angles. Oops. Just a little bit of glue and match it up this way. Then I'll take scissors, leaving a bit of a seam there for the glue to stick, and then fold my PLARN so I have a continuous strip. This way I think is preferable because it takes the joint seam and puts it at an angle, so that when you're knitting or crocheting, you don't hit one seam in one spot and have a bit of a bulk. Doing it this way spreads that seam at an angle and it blends into your project a little better. Other people tie knots, others overlap. See what method works best for you. One last thing. I have a book promo, and this book is called One Plastic Bag, and it's available on the Howard County Library System's website in ebook form or in hardcover. And it really inspired me to start teaching classes at the library, especially with children. This is the story of Aissatou Cissé, who is from Gambia. And traditionally, when you went to market, you carried all your things in a woven basket. And when that basket wore out, you tossed it aside and it would biodegrade and become one with nature. But as the plastic bag came along as a form of carrying things to market, when it fell apart and was thrown to the side of the road, it did not biodegrade. In fact, it collected water, which drew insects and mosquitoes and increased malaria. Farm animals were eating the bags and dying, and when the bags did go into the ground, they were interfering with crops. She saw this problem, and the day that they lost their goat because their goat had eaten a plastic bag and died was the day she said, "Enough is enough." So she went out and started collecting bags and washed them, hung them out to dry, cut them into strips, and started crocheting purses. And she had a small group of women come and join her in this endeavor. And of course they were laughed at, and their project was called Dirty, but they would gather at night when all the day's chores were done. And of course I'm sure anytime you gather to knit, crochet, or work on projects is a wonderful social time. And the expression laughing all the way to the bank, well, again, they were ridiculed all the way to the market, until they got to the market and people started buying these bags that they had created. It cleaned up the pollution in their village. It created small business opportunities for women. Here we go. Just take a page from the book to show that these bags became very popular, and it is now part of the fair trade. And I would highly encourage you. It's a very quick read, and at the end of the book the story doesn't stop there. It just gets better and better, proving that one person can make a difference, and when we all join in, the great things that we can accomplish. So I hope you have fun making PLARN, and I would encourage you that when you make a project with PLARN, or really any other project, we have a file on the library website called Created in Quarantine. Please add your projects to that and let us know what great things you're doing. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have fun making PLARN.